Rising tensions, from tariffs to retaliation. Since President Donald Trump's re-election in November 2024, US-Canada relations have been marred by escalating trade tensions. The conflict erupted on November 25, 2024, when Trump announced via Truth Social a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico, citing border security concerns. Simultaneously, he imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, urging Beijing to crack down on fentanyl production. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau swiftly condemned the move as reckless and warned of severe economic repercussions. Despite diplomatic efforts to de-escalate, Trump signed a memorandum on January 20, 2025, directing his cabinet to assess the emergency caused by unlawful migration and fentanyl inflows. This was a clear signal that tariffs were imminent. By February 1, 2025, Trump had formalized his trade strategy, issuing an executive order to enforce 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods, along with the promised 10% tariff on Chinese imports, set to take effect on February 4. Trudeau responded with $30 billion CAD in retaliatory tariffs on US exports, warning that this would expand to $125 billion CAD in the coming weeks. Temporary reprieve and renewed conflict. In February 3, Trump unexpectedly announced a one-month pause on tariffs for Canada and Mexico after securing agreements from both nations. Canada pledged to strengthen border security and appoint a fentanyl czar, while Mexico agreed to deploy additional troops to its northern border. However, the US proceeded with Chinese tariffs as planned, on February 4. As the March 4 deadline for the tariff pause approached, tensions reignited. On February 27, Trump reaffirmed his intent to reimpose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, alongside an additional 10% tariff on Chinese imports. Trudeau condemned the move, vowing equivalent retaliation. On March 3, markets braced for impact as fears of a full-scale trade war intensified. At midnight on March 4, the tariffs officially went into effect. Canada and China immediately retaliated, implementing their own tariffs on US goods. Trudeau labeled Trump's actions short-sighted and destructive, confirming Canada would impose a reciprocal 25% tariff on key US industries, including agriculture, consumer goods, and manufacturing. Meanwhile, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum adopted a cautious stance, opting for diplomatic talks before retaliating. Ontario's power play and further retaliation. Canada's response didn't stop at tariffs. On March 10, Ontario Premier Doug Ford declared a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the US, affecting 1.5 million American homes and businesses in states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. Ford warned that Ontario might escalate further, even threatening to cut off power exports entirely. Beyond energy, Ontario is weighing new economic countermeasures, including a surcharge on every megawatt of electricity sold to the US, canceling a $100 million contract with Elon Musk's Starlink, and removing US-made alcohol from elbow outlets. Meanwhile, Canadian MP Charlie Angus urged a boycott of US products, denouncing Trump's annexation rhetoric and calling for his exclusion from the G7 summit in June. The broader impact: US dependence on Canadian energy thus relies heavily on Canadian imports for crude oil, natural gas, electricity, uranium, and rare earth elements. In 2024 alone, the US imported $129 billion worth of energy from Canada, including 146 billion barrels of crude oil, 16.8 billion USD, 271 billion cubic feet of natural gas, 10.8 billion US, 37 terawatt hours of electricity, 185 billion US, 10 million pounds of uranium, 4 billion US. This dependency makes Canada's retaliatory measures particularly disruptive. With tensions rising, Canada is actively diversifying its export markets, focusing on China, Japan, and South Korea. The Trans Mountain Expansion (TMX) pipeline, completed in early 2024, has allowed Canada to redirect crude oil exports to Asia. In 2024, Alberta's energy exports to China surged fivefold, reaching $2 billion. US tariffs, economic fallout, and strategic implications. Despite the US imposing tariffs under the pretense of curbing fentanyl trafficking and illegal migration, data suggests these concerns are overblown. Canada accounts for only 0.2% of fentanyl entering the US, with the bulk originating from China and Mexico. This raises questions about Trump's true motivations for these economic restrictions. Many analysts speculate the tariffs are a means to pressure Canada into aligning with US economic and geopolitical interests. Trump has repeatedly floated the idea of annexing Canada as the 51st state, linking tariff relief to such a scenario. Others argue that these actions aim to secure control over Canada's vast natural resources, including oil, rare earth elements, and Arctic territories. Meanwhile, domestic US industries, especially automakers, manufacturers, and farmers, are bearing the brunt of the trade war. On March 5, after heavy lobbying from Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, Trump delayed auto tariffs for 1 month, offering brief relief. However, by March 6, financial markets remained volatile, with the S&P 500 falling another 2% and the Nasdaq dropping 2.5%, reflecting ongoing investor anxiety. What's next? As Canada, Mexico, and China ramp up their responses, the future of US trade policy under Trump remains uncertain. With Ontario, federal leaders, and industry executives preparing for further countermeasures, tensions are unlikely to subside soon. Will a long-term resolution be reached, or is this just the beginning of an entrenched economic battle? Stay tuned as this historic trade war unfolds.